Uh, Thank you. I'm really delighted to welcome everyone to this evening's talk. I mean, as a pilot says when you're on board, he says, I know you could have chosen another airline, and this evening a different TV channel. And I was tuned to that myself until about 5 minutes ago. So anyway, welcome to everyone. And first of all, some introductions to non-members. We're really delighted you've joined us this evening. I'm Sue Ball, the chair of the Thorney Island Society, and Jules Shellabear is our secretary. She does all the organising behind the scenes for our Zoom talks, and also sets up this marvellous programme of talks. Just one date for your diary before we get cracking with Jan's talk, which is Tuesday the 13th of July, when the RHS librarian Susan Robin is talking about the incredible collection at the Lindley Library, which is on Vincent Square. Jan is going to be talking for about an hour this evening, followed by Q&A. So if you'd like to put any questions that you have in the chat room, Jules will facilitate that afterwards. So this evening's talk is one that we've been looking forward to for the whole season. Jan Pancheri is the head gardener of Westminster Abbey, and she trained at Capel Manor when she was in her 30s and has been working at the Abbey for 22 years, which is a tremendous record. She's also written some children's books and illustrated them too, including one about a monk called Rufus. She assures me based on the life story of a real monk, but I don't know whether he was at the Abbey or not. But it's marvellous that Jan can bring together her love and knowledge of gardening and her artistic creativity. So she brings them together in her work at the Abbey, and we're delighted, Jan, that you're going to be sharing your twin passions with us this evening. Over to you, Jan.
Oh, thank you. Okay, is it over to me now? Okay, thank you so much for attending this talk. As you can imagine, there's a lot to sort of say about these amazing gardens, and I'm going to try and introduce you, give you some insights into the garden, whether you're already familiar with it or whether you would one day come to visit the garden. I'm basing it on my a book that I've written about the garden, and this is how I've put it together. So we're going to be going on a little tour around the Abbey, looking at the different gardens that are inside, and talking a little bit about the history, the trees, and looking also towards the future. Okay, I'm going to go into the talk now. Right, now let's see if this works. Right. Oh no, that's not right. There we are. Right. Okay, so this is my first slide. So this is a view of the Abbey in the summer. We've got the view of the Abbey looking down on the gardens, on the college garden, which are a rare survival. A lot of abbeys didn't keep their gardens after the Reformation. I think it's quite nice to have this rather brash flower in front of the very sedate looking Abbey. This is the book, the guide to the Abbey Gardens. When we were looking for the cover of this, we would have liked to have had something a bit more colourful, but it was slightly difficult for us because there was scaffolding here. This is just one of those things that happens when you're trying to do a book. But the garden is nice at all different times of the year. So I'm just going to take you now. So this is where you would come towards if you were visiting the Abbey Gardens. This is the first one you'd come to. So this is Dean's Yard. And it was in monastic times, it was the abbot's yard. And it used to have elm trees. Now it has these plane trees. And these are some of the champion trees of London. I don't know if you know that champion means it's like the largest of their kind. They certainly have grown very, very tall. They're actually hybrid tree, a cross between a tree from China and Japan and a tree from North America. And this is why they didn't really know how tall they would become, but they've got hybrid vigor, which means that they could resist the pollution. Behind we have, this is Church House. And I happen to know that this wall at the bottom, this remains of the brew house and bakehouse that belonged to the monks of Westminster Abbey. This is a medlar, which this is growing on the site of a plane tree that blew down in the storms of 1987. So this was planted, yes, in the early 90s. It's a very nice, it's an interesting tree. There's not that many of them in London. There used to be one in St James's Park, which the remains of it were there for a long time, but I don't think there's anything left now. But it has this tree doesn't grow too large. It has very attractive white blossoms, and then it has this very medieval looking fruit that comes later with these strange horns. So this would be an excellent tree for any garden, really, a small garden tree. I've attempted to eat this fruit, which is apparently it's very delicious, but I couldn't quite face it. So, but yeah, it's a very good thing to grow. This is how the Dean's Yard used to look in around the 1840s, 50s. So these are the elm trees that used to grow. And at the moment, we're trying to renovate the grass. And in order to do this, we've sort of slightly fenced it off to try and prevent boys from playing football, mainly from Westminster School. But here you see there's railings all the way around and the schoolboys are still playing football on it. So I think it's unlikely that this will ever change. This is from my book, Brother William's Year, where, so this is obviously we don't really have records of what it used to look like on Dean's Yard. So this is Dean's Yard here, was the Abbot's Yard. And these are the farm animals that would have been kept. They kept chickens, pigs, and this is an elm tree with some crows. This is the brew house and bakehouse. And there's Brother Barnabas just tossing a pancake there. And going into the cloisters, we've got a little pilgrim. He's going to stay in the almonry, and then this is the great cloister here, also known as the Garth. This is where the monks used to do their ablutions on the south side, and on the north side is where they used to do their studying because it was the warmest area. So okay, that's the next one. So this is the great cloister now. Which you can see is quite a shady area, you know, the sun's shining, but the grass has to withstand the shadow of the abbey over it most of the time, which means it gets very mossy. But it also remains green because this is the only part of the abbey that has a sprinkler system. So it's kept in fairly good condition most of the year round. We have this little fountain here that was put in a couple of years ago. And it's sort of to remember that when they used to have a rainwater well here. We are fight a losing battle against all the medieval plants that are descendants from the ones that were there when the monks were there, such as prunella, and lots of other sort of dandelions and all sorts. But so anyway, this is pretty much a sterile piece of grass. This is what looks down on us while we're mowing the grass. No one else really goes into this part of the, it's not really open to the public. So we feel quite privileged to be looking up and seeing these faces looking down on us. Now, if you can imagine walking around the cloisters, well, if you haven't been, you won't be able to, but it's a very nice part of the abbey, lovely and shady. So you'd walk past the great cloister and turn right and then left. And you'd walk through the dark cloister and you would be greeted by the sight of the little cloister, which has a beautiful fountain. And this is the area where some of the elderly monks would have lived, and they would have been able to enjoy the scents of the plants that were held inside. this area. This is the this is the gardeners. This is my imagination of what the gardeners might have looked like who created this garden in the 1730s. Robert and Anne Southey. He was the head gardener, and then when he died, she took over. But they've written a little. They've left us with this account, which I think it's got Anne Southey, but I don't think she wrote this herself because that's her signature at the bottom. But you can see that there's a lot of sweeping and weeding's been going on. They've had to buy 2 dozen brooms, 1.5 dozen rubbers, which were brushes, and they've also, for Little Cloister Garden, they've bought some cockle shells, which I would have been fascinated to see what they did with those, maybe an edging or something. And there's turfing iron as well, so they obviously had a lawn in there. So this is more or less what the garden looks like. This photograph was actually taken in 2006, and we had these honey spurges there, Euphorbia mellifera, which they really do smell of honey, and they filled the whole cloisters with the scent going round the corners. But we've replaced them because we wanted to have more sort of flowery plants in there, and these just became too big, really. Oh, sorry. You can see this is the fountain. It's actually made of white marble, but it's not really clear that it is because it often gets quite black. This whole fountain is now being renovated. It's been lead lined, and so it's far less likely to go wrong or become blocked or anything. We've also got quite a lot of fish living in here. So this is the garden at different seasons. This was just taken a few days ago. This is Lavatera trimestis. It's one of my favourite plants. Nice, very nice annual. Originally, we wanted to have a white and green scheme in here, and these alliums are also white. They're called Mount Everest. They're very tall as well as being very white, but they've just gone over here. But I think they do still create a nice sort of structural look. And this is the Virginia creeper that we used to have, which is Parthenocissus quinquifolia, because that's the difference between it and Boston ivy. It's got like 5 leaves instead of 3. I've heard this colour scheme described as fruit salad, which is quite a good description. This picture was taken very early in the morning when you've got the sun just coming through. We no longer actually have this plant. It grew just up this side of the arch, but the trunk was so big it eventually broke off. But well, I mean, maybe one day we'll plant another one, but it did take over the whole of this wall, so it was, there's good things about it, but you know, a garden evolves. This is just to show you a different view. This is in the winter about 2 years ago. Very occasionally, despite the fact that our garden is very protected from the weather, we do get a severe winter about every 10 years. And about 2 years ago, we had this extremely impressive looking lot of icicles. I'm quite amazed that the water still is trying to come through. I think the other gardener's trying to turn it off there, but luckily all the fish survived, so that was a good thing. So this is just taken recently. So we have allowed some other plants have started growing here. These foxgloves have obviously seeded themselves, but I think they're architectural. They look nice. I love these sort of cottage garden plants. This is the original entrance to St Catherine's Chapel, which obviously it was an actual church. We have these 2 wooden doors there. And this is one of our old gas lights that we have going all around the abbey. So this is inside St Catherine's garden. So you can see this. So this was a chapel that the monks used to use. Rather surprisingly, they used it as an infirmary. So basically a hospital for monks. This church had already fallen down before the garden was affected by the Blitz. So this garden was actually only created in 1966, which was when these houses were built. But even though it's a small garden, it's very, it's a beautiful, it's a very sunny garden. You can grow quite a lot of things in there, Mediterranean plants. I think the reason is we're just trying out a new mower here, see how we've matched up the stripes, which is a very skilled part of the job. On the right hand side, we've just got some of the, you can see the Byzantine arches, which show that this was one of the oldest parts of the abbey. These originally went straight through, they weren't bricked up like this. So this is the other side, which is a private garden, a private area. It's where some of the residents live. So we've got a nice viburnum here, which grows really well. Viburnum plicatum, it's also known as the wedding cake viburnum. We used to have Magnolia grandiflora in here, but they were very, very shady, and they also stopped, a lot of water came off them, so they weren't such a good planting. I think it's nice when you do have nice architecture, it's good to be able to reveal it with plants that don't grow too tall. Going back to St. Catherine's, this is the view in the other direction. So we've got lovely cistus, and we've got this red valerian here. So these are marvellous for bees. We've got erigeron, which I decided to plant one day in a happy moment, and it now grows all over all the top of all the walls in everywhere. I like it, and luckily I don't think it's done any damage so far, but it's sort of a bit like sort of Cornish. It reminds me of Cornwall to see that. Just to talk about these were the pillars that would originally held up the roof of this chapel, in these pillars they were recently cleaned, and we found, well, not me, but the conservation department found these notches in the side of the pillars, and we realized that they were to put up screens between the beds where the monks used to lie. I used to think, oh, it's very strange that they used a chapel as an infirmary, but in fact the reason was that that when the monks were sick, they couldn't get to attend all the services that were being held in the abbey, and so they could give them mass while they were sort of in the hospital. This is a Cynomeles nivalis. This grows on the rear wall of the St. Catherine's, and I just wanted to mention the fact that with winter flowers, although this is from Japan, I mean, it just looks absolutely perfect in this garden. These are winter flower, they carry on flowering for 3 months, so they're far better value than a lot of other plants that we have, a lot of spring plants. And the flowers come out before the leaves, which really, you know, you can really enjoy them. As I mean, they are on the back wall, but there's not much that would grow there, but anyway, and then you get the fruits as well afterwards. So this is some of the planting. Basically, when I was thinking of what to plant in this garden, I was thinking of what would cope with this very dry situation and a lot of sun. And here I've grown a yellow broom. It's called Cytisus now, but it's originally it was Plantagenista, which is what the Plantagenets were named after, because I was sort of quite intrigued by reading about Geoffrey the Fair, who was the first Plantagenet. He used to walk around with a sprig of broom in his hat. And then at some stage in history, I should say what this is. It's during the reign of Henry III. He had to sign. He had to observe the privileges granted in the Magna Carta, and he agreed to it in this chapel when it was still a chapel. So that was just my little, I don't know, piece of irony or something. So we also, I wanted to say as well that if you do have a space in your garden for a broom, they're very nice plants and they've got a very distinctive smell. And I believe that this is where the name broom comes from, because they actually used to use brooms to make to sweep floors. I try to grow some sort of wildflowers as well. These are really good for bees. This is a teasel before it's actually come out into its blue colouring. It's in this picture you can see all the cobwebs. I just took this a few days ago and I've noticed that there's masses and masses of cobwebs this year. I don't know if anyone else has. I don't know why exactly, but they seem to be a bit earlier this year and last year than, because they usually start noticing them in September, I find. I just wanted to, so a lot of these plants that are sort of wild plants, they have several ways of preserving themselves, of keeping themselves going. And one of these that this plant does is it stores rain in between. It sort of captures rain here, and insects that drown in it, it actually eats them. It uses, it's sort of like, can convert to an insectivorous plant, which is, I think, rather amazing. Right, next slide. Now, we're going into College Garden now. This is an old drawing I did of for one of our garden leaflets. So this shows some of the trees that are in College Garden. Obviously, I don't know, I haven't really told you about the history, but the College Garden has been there for as long as the Abbey has been there. So it's reputed to be about 1,000 years old, if not older. And it was used as a productive garden by the monks, but it was also used as a pleasure garden, which is what it is now, really. It's a garden for recreation. We have visitors now. I'll just point out some of the trees on here. Here we have some quince trees. We have 3 quince trees there as you enter the garden, and some apple stepovers here, little very small apple trees. Here we have, this is a pink cherry tree. These 2 trees in the middle are plane trees, which were all planted in 1849. Here's a white mulberry tree, which is just about to have fruit on it. That's a thorn tree at the back. This is a Judas tree. I think this was a thorn tree, but there's not much left. There's a bit left of it, but some of it's died in the last couple of years. This is an enormous fig tree, which I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. And this is a Colruyteria paniculata. I'm just showing you where these truck trees are, and this is a beautiful pyracantha. So right, I shall show you in more detail. So this is the fig tree, which is pretty huge. I reckon we think it's about 100 years old, and it was planted facing north between 2 buildings, and so it's never really had enough light, and this has made it reach very far forwards, so it sort of leans and has to be supported on this prop. It's developed it's got all these sort of lumps and bumps on it, which a lot of, when children come to the garden, they think there's some kind of magic going on. It does have fruit, but it doesn't really ripen, so they just tend to fall off. But it's an interesting tree to have, because you've got the lovely texture of the big leaves, and it's also an incredibly cool place to sit in the summer. This is our walnut tree, which is rather a sad sight, because it leans at about a 45-degree angle, and I think it gets a bit lower every year. Because behind it has a plane tree which also leans at about a 60-degree angle, so doesn't really have any chance apart from leaning. However, it does produce loads and loads of walnuts every year, which are greatly enjoyed by some squirrels that live in the garden. They actually live in, somebody very kindly gave us an owl nesting box, which the squirrels think is absolutely marvellous. And you see their tails sticking out from time to time, but they collect the walnuts, and then they bury them all around the garden. And as you're weeding, you're sort of thinking, oh, what's this? This is an unusual plant, and you realise it's you know, if we just left them to their own devices, there'd basically be a forest of walnut trees. This is an Azara microphylla, which I only discovered when I came to the garden. I planted it in about 2004, and you can see it's grown quite tall now. It's actually from Chile, but it really fits in with the sort of feathery look that medieval people enjoyed, and it's I mean, I just like it myself, really. It's evergreen, so that's very useful for a small garden. And it's got quite nice trunk, and it also has scented flowers in March, which are little yellow pom-poms that smell of vanilla. It smells like you've just been baking cakes. That greets me when I come out of my office. It's quite nice. So this is the garden in the spring. It's, well, you can imagine, when I first started working at the garden, which was in June 1999, I just could not believe it. I just kept pinching myself. I'd never been in a garden before where there wasn't anything horrible to cover up. In every direction you see like spectacular buildings, and just amazing, really. But this is in April is probably the nicest time to see the garden. We actually have a little meadow area there. I haven't actually got a slide of that, but it is very pretty if you can come, you know, in the early spring particularly. This is a Tai Haku, a great white cherry, which so that flowers earlier than the pink cherry, and this is why it was actually extinct at one time in Japan. And it was found growing in a garden of somebody in Sussex, and all the cuttings, all the trees that they have now come from this one tree. So that's a little bit of history for you. Here we have, in April, we always plant a lot of tulips, because it's a good time to have. It's a good thing for the colour, especially after the winter when it's been quite bleak. But this year, because it was so windy, all the tulips sort of blew over to one side, which made them look quite surreal. This is just taken recently. This is in our rose garden. This is Sceptred Isle, which is one of the roses of the David Austin roses. And you can see it's an absolutely amazing year for roses this year. They've just had a lot of rain, and they've had the sun, so it's been perfect for them. This is one of my favourite roses. It's very difficult to photograph. All I can say is if you had it in your garden, you just completely love it, because it just flowers all the way through the summer. It's never boring. It doesn't really have many thorns, just a few down here. It changes colour from peach, and it ends up at this sort of gorgeous, sort of old-fashioned pink colour. And it has lovely, the new growth is very pretty as well. The new leaves are a sort of bronzy red colour, lovely for flower arrangements. Now, this is the vine. So we have this vine growing, which produces black grapes, very small ones, which we try to eat, but it gets a bit tedious after a while. We always keep it in this formal, well, I say always, if we possibly can, we keep it in this formal arrangements where it's trained on wires. So this is part of Westminster School, this little building, this little window here. It's now the school tuck shop, but it used to be the caretaker's or workman's room. And we used to actually be able to sometimes, if we were cutting the vine, we could sometimes watch the World Cup on the television through the window. Anyway, this year, last year, because we were on furlough for a little while, the vine became completely overgrown, and it completely covered up the window of the tuck shop, so the ladies had no light at all coming in, and it went right over the school, the flat roof of the school, and right up the fire escape, and so nobody could have got out in the event of a fire. And it actually took us about 2 days to get it back to normal again, and a lot of trips to the skip with all this pieces of vines, but we still got some grapes on it, so that was a good thing. So this is my vision of what the garden used to look like in medieval times. One of the main things is that the garden had these paths. It also had a path going across in that direction, which it retained until relatively recently. So it was a productive garden. So we've got vegetables, we've got herbs, we've got an orchard of fruit trees that would have had pears, apples, plums, damsons, cherries. The gardening monk on whom I based Brother William actually won a prize for his plums. And they had such a surfeit of plums and other fruits one year that they used to give them away to the local community on the 25th of July, which is St James's Day. Around the garden, this is supposed to be vines, and we've got some strawberries. I think those are strawberries and red currants. But the garden was also a pleasant garden to walk around. We have shady trees. We have these two ponds, which they would have had fish, freshwater fish, that the stew ponds that the monks could eat. Here's two little monks just dipping their feet in there. There's a little archery butt, because they used to do archery in the garden. But these are all deciduous trees, because they had these beliefs. They loved to have deciduous trees around them, because it sort of represented a sort of the loss of the trees in autumn, and the regrowth of new leaves in the spring represented sort of life after death to them. Here we've got the water going by, where Great College Street is, and there's a delivery of wheat or something coming along. And here, this is Brother William, and this is Rufus. They're just taking a pot out with a plant in it. This is his tool shed. It's got a very good tool shed there. And this is his, instead of an office, he's got a little house. And this is the thatched walls of the garden. Oh, and I should say, the garden also, as it does now, it provided things that are useful to the abbey. We've got a dovecote, and we've also got these beehives. So these skeps, they were actually woven, and the beeswax was used to make candles for the services, and the honey was used to make wine, also for the services. Since I've been at the Abbey, I've been trying to reintroduce the monastic garden back, because it had become a very sort of functional garden. There was a lot of useful plants like laurels, and a lot of evergreen plants, but there was hardly any flowers, and there wasn't really much in the way of herbs or aromatic plants, which I particularly like. So I was allowed to dig up. We removed a knot garden, which was it was unfortunate, because it was in a very sunny spot, which it seemed a bit of a waste to just have evergreen plants, and also that the hedges that it was made of were made of Lanicera nitida, which is a sort of fast-growing version of box, but it has got completely out of control. So it was so wide that it was trying to shear sheep or something. You just couldn't get any control over it. It was all wobbling about all over the place, and these big holes were opening up in it. So anyway, we were given permission to dig this up, and we replaced it with this. So we had these gardens. So there's 4 main gardens, one for culinary herbs, because medieval food was very bland. Didn't really taste of much, so they needed that for their cooking. Some dye plants, which obviously they didn't have dye on or anything, so sort of did a bit of research into plants that they would have had. And one of the very successful ones is woad, which is famous for making blue dye, and this yes, it's grown fantastically well, and it was I sort of found out that in Elizabethan times the colour blue was so popular in clothes that Queen Elizabeth I actually had to make laws to stop farmers converting all their fields for growing woad instead of crops that people could eat, because she was worried the nation was going to starve otherwise. Also, we have medicinal herbs here, some of which we still use today, like comfrey for bruises and sprains. Others that catmint. We've got I've put it up. This is Badger the cat. He's now in Durham Cathedral, but he was very partial to the catnip. Milk thistle, which is used for liver, purifying your liver or something, I think. White horehound is brilliant for coughs. I've used it myself. It tastes absolutely disgusting, but it does work. And then I've just got a few vegetables here: broad beans and garlic, and which they would have had, and black cabbage. They had they had kale. They grew all sorts of different cabbages and all sorts of. They loved leeks. That was their favourite vegetable of all. They just thought the smell of it was delicious. So anyway, it just shows what they were up against in those days. I also created a couple of turf seats, go into that in a minute, they're a medieval idea. And round the edges we had, I've got some strewing plants, they were plants that were used instead of air freshener or scented candles. They used to cut down plants and use the scented leaves to make places smell nicer indoors, and they were also used as sort of insecticide. Here we've just got a sort of beautiful park with roses and sweet peas, which also attracts insects which you would have needed for pollination. Right, so this is the actual thing, which was created for the Queen to open in 2010. So it was May the 21st. We'd had the most terrible spring. It was rained every single day, I think, leading up to the 21st of May. The 21st of May was the most beautiful day you could possibly imagine. Everything was all green, and I was very lucky. I had a little chat to the Queen, and she asked me some questions, and the schoolboys from Westminster School had actually planted all these herbs because it was to commemorate the 450th anniversary of the founding of Westminster School. And we got these, we ordered in these wicker sides, but we now weave them ourselves from wicker in about February. This is the centerpiece. This is the first time I realised that sweet peas love it growing horizontally instead of up a pole. They seem to flower like anything, so I was quite pleased with that. This is one of my turf benches, which is a mixture of chamomile and some other plants, mainly grass and a few daisies, clover and so on. The idea of this, the medieval idea, was you sat on this and it was nice and cool, and you could also smell the aroma of plants, which is a bit like a tiny bit of the countryside, I suppose. And these are some helpful visitors to one of our Open Squares Day who agreed to pose on my turf bench. You can't really see the turf bench, but anyway, that was the idea. This is one of my favourite plants. This is an Angelica archangelica, which is very statuesque, and it has the leaves. You can use them apparently mixed with cream cheese, I think, in sandwiches, but it has that amazing smell that some of us may remember from when you used to be able to buy crystallized angelica, which is a sort of lurid green color, and used to use it for the stems on fairy cakes with the flowers. You made the icing flowers, but this was it was considered to be a very useful plant as a protector against the plague. I don't know how well it worked, but anyway, one word of warning though is it does seed itself all over the entire garden. This is lady's mantle, Alchemilla mollis, and this is, I've just showed it with the dew or raindrops on the waxy leaves, and this was alchemists use this. They use to collect the water in their experiments to turn lead into gold. So it's they consider it to be very pure water. It's a fabulous garden plant. It flowers at this time of year, and these sort of green, pale green flowers go really well with roses and anything pink, really, pink or purple or white. And it's also is a herbal plant as well. This is a picture of woad. This is how amazing it looks. I love this dirty yellow colour, and flowers for ages. I think it's gone over now. This is sweet woodruff, which is one of the best strewing plants. It's when it's dried, it smells of new mown hay, and if you have it in the house, the smell lasts for about a month, so it's quite good value, really. It's called woodruff because the way the leaves are arranged actually looks like ruffs, and if you plant any in your garden, it's a fantastic brown colour plant. You won't have any weeds, although it can take over a bit, but it's quite easy to dig up. Here also we've got this is behind it, we've got hellebore, which do tend to they do propagate themselves all over the garden, do tend to take over, but they're lovely. This is some of the flowers. But these were used by because of the doctrine of signatures, where if things look like something, they would use to cure something. And these were unfortunately used to because the roots looked a bit like intestinal worms. They were used to given to people if they had worms, but unfortunately they're rather poisonous, and so I think they would have realised eventually it wasn't really a good idea to use those. This is another example of the doctrine of signatures. It's based on Greek philosophy of medicine. They believed that these leaves look like liver. And so I was fascinated to see what they were like, these plants, hepaticas. I've never really heard of them before. But I found that they're very beautiful flowers, and they grow really, really well in College Garden because they love dry, shady conditions. And so we have a lot of them growing underneath the white mulberry, if you ever do happen to get to the garden. They're related to anemones. So this is a garden. I'm just going to talk briefly about the statues in the garden. So this is an engraving of the garden in the 1860s. And here we have some, you can see how many trees there are in the garden. This is actually where the greenhouse is now. And here are two of the statues, which originally were at James II's Royal Chapel as part of Whitehall. So James II was the brother of Charles II, and he was Roman Catholic. And unfortunately his chapel burnt down, and the abbey was given the altarpiece, which it was used for many years in the abbey, and it had 4 statues of saints, which they were also in the abbey. But at some stage when there was a new altar piece was made, the altar piece was passed on to another church and several other things, but the statues ended up in the garden. So this is 2 of them as they were by the back gate. Poor things, they've had a terrible time. The various bits have fallen off them, or else they've had a chemical reaction to the rain, and they've turned into this sort of black mottle sort of thing. They're originally made of white marble, and they were carved by Arnold Quellin, who was a colleague of Grinling Gibbons. And if you want to see some that are in better condition, a lot of the rest of the altarpiece went to Burnham-on-Sea, which is in Somerset, just off the M4, St Andrew's Church. There's a bit about it on the internet if you're interested. But in the meantime, these statues have been removed from the garden. They can be viewed within the abbey from the Diamond Jubilee galleries, which is well worth a visit if you ever get a chance. It's in the Triforium. You get a wonderful view from there. These are the other statues that are in the garden, which are they're by Enzo Plazzotta, who's an Italian sculptor. So it's quite an unusual crucifix, as it doesn't have any cross, and I think it has a symbolic meaning. It was to be placed originally in the middle of one of the lawns, but I think it was felt that it was probably better to have it in a slightly more secluded position. So anyway, this is still there if you want to go and have a look. It's quite near the fountain, so it's a good spot to sit and listen to the splashing of the fountain. So I'm just going to do a little bit quickly about the history of how the abbey was why this site was chosen. So a lot of monasteries made their home along the River Thames. The abbey was fortunate. Now it's very built up area, but in those days it really was all fields. So the abbey had room for orchards, and it also had 4 acres of vineyards, and it had fields to grow all its wheat and barley and so on. This map is just showing that it used to own, I'm sure everybody knows the abbey used to own Covent Garden, and this is where some of the monks were doing their gardening, and they were using St Martin in the Fields as their church. The abbey actually requisitioned it to make sure that only they could use it. You can just see Lambeth Palace across the way, this little horse ferry going across. I've just done this just included this picture just to show this is the back of the abbey here. The garden would have been around here somewhere. And this is the bank where the old abbot's mill would have been. This is actually when the Thames is frozen over, some people playing skittles here. But I sort of think this is how I think of the abbey in the past, sort of looking rather isolated. This, I've just put this in to indicate, I was just trying to explain how in the time of the monks, the trees, the shade of trees was just like, to them, it was the most beautiful thing you could possibly imagine. And they would encourage a tree's beauty, even if it would have been better to prune it to get more fruit or something. That was, they just found it absolutely delightful, and the sound of the wind in the trees and so on, they found it very therapeutic. This is the medieval idea of grass. They liked a flowery mead. They found plain grass very boring, and so they always had like daisies, buttercups, scarlet pimpernel. You can probably recognise quite a few of the things in this tapestry, but that is what they considered to be beautiful. I just quickly mention about the walls. There was a decision made to put walls around the abbey in 1375. Whether this was due to, I've read that it might have been due to people coming and stealing the crops, or it could have had something to do with protection from the plague, or it could have been influenced by Lambeth Palace, because they had walls, and which apparently were thatched in 1320. They used reeds because there was a lack of other suitable materials around London. They had to use Kentish ragstone for the actual walls themselves. Oh, this is a little drawing I did of some of the monks making the wall. So here, this is just to explain, it's mentioned in the book that we were planning to have the wall was being renovated, and at the same time the greenhouse. So this is the back of the wall. So if you're ever walking past College Green, this is where the greenhouse is, on the other side of that. This is the Jewel Tower, which is apparently where Queen Philippa, who was the wife of Edward III, she used to have a little garden there. As often is the case, a garden is sacrificed for a building, although it's not such a bad building, I suppose. But so it was she who brought rosemary reputedly to the country in about early 1400s, and she had cuttings sent over from France. And they became like a gardening sensation at the time, because people only had very boring evergreens such as holly and yew to put in their gardens. And this was an amazing plant, which not only was herbal and antiseptic, but it also had flowers. It had beautiful blue flowers. And so it soon became very, very popular. This is our greenhouse as it used to be, and this is the wall behind it, which unfortunately, because of all these plants growing out of the wall, it made all the bricks fall and crash through the greenhouse. We had about 4 panes of glass knocked out, luckily not on top of any of our heads, only on the plants. But it was decided that this should be restored. So this is some of the problems that were going on, even more major, with bits of roots sticking out of the walls. This is how it is now. Oh, and here's part of the thorn tree. So if you ever do come to the garden, you must let me show you this amazing plant. It's a very pretty one called the Midland thorn. You can see the walls already attracting some moss there. This is another area of the wall, just to show you how nice it's looking. I don't think most people walking past the wall realise it was built in 1376. So this is a little bit about our greenhouse, which was built in 1929 by this firm called Mackenzie and Moncur. There was a bit of a fad for hothouse building then, and I think the Abbey thought that they could grow plants to use, flowers to grow in their services, or possibly even sell them, such things as chrysanthemums. So this is the new greenhouse. It's not really, what happened was it was dismantled. All the wood was taken away and cleaned because it had varnish on it. And here we also had a new piece built at the end for our sort of recreation, our tea area, which is very nice to have a bit of daylight coming through because it was very dark before. And he's also made the glass, he's shaped it scalloped to draw the water away from these thin pieces of wood, because they all rotted in the last greenhouse we had. You can see the wall, how it was redone here. This is, for the first time ever, we had blinds, so we had this lovely shade, and this is the rather dramatic digging up of the terrible concrete which was in the floor at that time. So this is the finished greenhouse. You can see how much light is coming through. And here, I think these are some chili plants. This is the new floor we've got, lovely stone, and the metal was all stripped of all its horrible paint, and it's now been galvanized and it all looks lovely. So this is the before picture. You can see how the water was coming in and washing off the varnish. So this is from the bunker roof. Oh, I didn't even mention the bunker. There's a wartime bunker in the garden. I can show you that if you ever come on a tour of the garden. So this is our lovely new greenhouse. And I just wanted to mention that we use totally organic methods. So we don't use any insecticides or any weed killer or anything like that. And we've noticed that we have so many ladybirds and insects and birds because we look after them basically. And we're also using peat-free compost, which is really good. Okay. And this is my final slide. This is just showing the garden on when there's just about to be a band concert, which I'm hoping this can happen again in the near future. It's been certainly on the cards to start in July. The last Wednesday in July, it's 12 till 2. So if you want to bring along a picnic and see a brass band, that is, you can. Okay, that's all from me now. I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh, Jan, thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant.
What was it?
A personal tour, and I had no idea. First of all, there were so many gardens really within the Abbey complex, all the variety of trees and planting. But if I could sneak in a question before Jules takes over with the Q&A, I wonder, is your garden now really, or is it Westminster Abbey Gardens?
Oh, is it my garden? Oh yes, my garden, obviously. Well, not really, but you know, I do try, and I just put my little bits in where I can, I suppose. Yeah.
Oh, okay then, Jules, over to you with the Q&A. Thanks, Jan. We'll thank you formally at the end.
Okay.
Lovely, Jan. Thank you. Chris says that he doesn't recognize St. Catherine's Garden, and can one visit it? Is that within your area?
Well, it's not actually open to the public, but you can view it through the doorway. It's not actually, that part of the Abbey is not actually open at the moment, but I hope it will be again soon, because you should always be able to see Little Cloister and St. Catherine's Garden, even if you can't go into them.
Okay, lovely. Someone asks, have the gardens ever been on Gardener's World or any other TV show?
Yeah, they've been on Songs of Praise, and they've been on This Morning with Dermot Gavin in about 2011, although he mainly concentrated on St. Catherine's Garden. Oh, and the Herb Garden. So that, yeah, I think that's it really. But I'm hoping that to do some tours of the garden in the future. That's sort of going back to your previous question, really.
Yeah, well, we'd look forward to that.
You can see all these secret areas, you see, if that happens.
Yes, right. Yeah. Why did the monks choose St. James's Day to give away the surplus fruit and veg? Augusta,
Oh. I don't
you
know.
know?
I assume because it was conveniently around the same time of year as they had a lot of plums, but actually I should know the answer to that. I shall find out.
Yeah, a good time of year. Yeah. How is it possible to book for the band concert?
Oh, you can just, I think, well, I mean, if you do have to book, it'll be on the Abbey website. Or usually you just turn up though. But I don't know if I'm assuming they'll have no restrictions by then.
Okay, what was the date again?
Oh, it's the first, no, sorry, the last Wednesday in July.
Okay.
And then it'll be all through August.
Okay.
All the Wednesdays in August.
Okay. Okay. So I think it is advisable to check the
I'll send you
website.
when I find out, I'll email you.
Okay, yeah, that'd be lovely. Then we can let everyone know. Yep. Was there a significance to planting elm trees, in particular in Dean's Yard originally?
Oh yes. Well, it was just that those were the commonly used trees in London at the time. You know, before all the industrial pollution, elm trees were used just because they were, suppose they were tough, and also the timber was used as it was very good for furniture, and also they used to make water pipes out of it. They used to hollow out the branches and use them as water pipes to get rid of the water in the Abbey cloisters, apparently, according to the library.
Wow. Yeah, we had heard that the elm was the predecessor to the plane as the London tree.
Yes.
Yeah. Also from Louise, do you use volunteers in the garden?
Well, we haven't done. The only thing we have had an apprenticeship, and we've had some work experience, but not so far. No, we haven't done volunteering as such.
Okay. From Chris, Jan, you mentioned so many interesting and teasing elements, like the medieval preference for feathery trees, the link between broom and the Plantagenets, Boston ivy versus Virginia creeper, which I think covers the Admiralty Citadel. Does your book expand on these?
Not really. I mean, there's some things that have gone into. The thing is, there's a lot of pictures in my book. You'll have to buy it. It's like it's only £7 or something. But some of those things. Obviously, there's other things. There's some things in there that I haven't mentioned, and there's things I don't know exactly what's in there.
Okay, no, we'll definitely put in the follow-up, we'll definitely put a link to your book. Yeah, I agree. Lots of teasing elements. Graham asks, you mentioned putting the excess vine on a skip. Does the Abbey compost its green waste?
Yes, so we do that. We do. In fact, the only reason when I said skip, I think we did probably put the link. We did put it on the compost heap, but it's just that the woody parts don't really rot down. That, you know, they're incredibly strong. I know we have a very proud compost heap area, which is just behind the band tents.
Lovely.
Oh dear.
Lovely, full of lovely worms. Augusta has checked out the website already. The band concerts, it's on the Abbey website as Brass on the Grass.
That's it, yes.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Augusta. Mark asks, the new greenhouse looks lovely. What will you use it predominantly for? Mark, to everybody, is the parks manager of St. James's Park and the Green Park. I expect he's jolly jealous of your greenhouse.
Oh, hello, Mark. It's well, we use it for propagation. We grow lots of seeds in it. We're growing seeds now for next year's bedding. You know, we always grow wallflowers, and we also do cuttings, lots of cuttings. I mean, it's a marvelous area because we're able to use it for educational purposes. You know, any sort of student we have, we're able to teach them so many things about, you know, everything that you need to know, really. So yeah. If I answered, is that enough of an answer?
Yeah, I think so. Mike says, do you hope to stay with this garden for the rest of your career, or is there anywhere that you'd really like to move on to?
Oh
That's a
gosh.
tricky one.
Oh, I don't think probably, well, I don't know. I can't really see myself moving on. It's sort of like my dream job in a way. Although it would be lovely to work in a garden that wasn't so dry and didn't have so many plane trees.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's lovely having the public in as well, but we haven't seen any for about 2 years. But probably not is the answer to that. But who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? And Sue said, what happened to the gardens during lockdown? You mentioned about the vine going all over the fire escape. So during lockdown,
well, we were furloughed for a few months between April to August. And that was when it all happened, because obviously that's a time when a lot of things grow. There was somebody cutting the grass, but I don't think they really realized how much is involved really with the garden, how many things you have to do, because we're still struggling with all the weed seeds that germinated while we weren't there. You know, it takes a long time to get back to where you were. Yes, right. That reminds me of the lovely medieval. I love the idea that they thought just plain grass was boring, you know. And so you've got all these, like, you know, obviously clovers and things that are ground creeping, but all sorts of other plants that would have been very short, really. They're also, I mean, they would have things like clover. It's a shame that people don't grow them in the grass because they feed the grass as well. Okay, yep. Oh, we got a great one here from Louise. 1 year's seeding, 7 years weeding. Very, very true. Okay, I did have something to, oh yeah, the internet connection went a little bit funny in 2 places. Okay. The rose, what was the lovely apricot-y it's Rosa mutabilis. I think it means the word mutabilis means it changes. Okay, right, yep. And also went a bit funny on about over the was it a Japanese cherry, the lost plant? Oh yes. Yeah. Where did that that's appear? Taihaku, the great white cherry, which was and it was discovered in the garden of, it was Captain Ingram in Sussex. Okay. Yeah, we have heard that one before too. Yeah, your turf bench is absolutely lovely, almost too good to sit on. Do people know that they can sit on them? Well, then nobody's really allowed in the garden, in that garden, so they can't really sit on them. I suppose I need to create some around the garden, really, don't I? Really nice. Yeah. Okay, a couple more messages just come in. From Victor. Have your mulberries fruited? In St. James's Park, there are none. No mulberries or trees? No, I think no mulberries. The trees are there. Well, the trouble is, when I first planted that mulberry, we had so many mulberries off it. It was brilliant for the first few years. But then they just, I don't know if it's not fruiting well or if it's just the birds eat them all. The blackbirds really like them. The white mulberry, though, they don't bother with that. And I do eat those quite a bit. But they're not as nice as black mulberries. They're very sweet and they don't really taste of anything. Okay, that's interesting. Any links with the Physic Garden in Chelsea? Well, not really. I mean, we went and had a look. We did a tour. We did a snowdrop tour in there. I mean, you know, we should have links with them. If anyone wants to do any sort of joining up, I'd be very happy to participate. Yeah. I wonder if back in the day when the Physic Garden was naming everything, Linnaeus' name for everything, if because it's just down the river, up the river, sorry. Oh yeah. Okay, I think that might be it on the questions on the chat. Okay, I'll close that.
Thank you, Jules, and thank you, Jan. I wonder if I could ask everyone to unmute and just give Jan a round of applause before we see her.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
See everyone again on the 13th of July for our next talk. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Bye-bye.
Oh, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.